when it comes to our like our players and stuff, the thing that's always been important to me, I think to all of us, is this idea of creating games that have a chance of leaving a lasting and positive impression on players. Like we want, and that's hard to define, but we just want to create games. It's right on our website. It's like we want to make games that create, we say, spark your imagination like the games you played as a kid. But we think back to the games that inspired us when we were kids that we still think about, decades later. And what was it? What is it about those games that stuck with us forever? It's not necessarily that we remember those games, start to finish, but we remember moments. We remember like how they made us feel in certain events and so on. And just like trying to create games that have a chance of doing that for others. And that it's hard to achieve that. We don't ever know if we've achieved that until we like start getting feedback from people like for real. But at least we go for it. At least I could say we go for it. Like we're trying to create something that will result in a positive experience for people. And again, that sounds it sounds so obvious when I put it in words that way. I don't think it's like particularly special, but it's just knowing that games have quite a bit of power as a medium. They're powerful as an interactive storytelling medium, and trying to look for ways to like harness the specific power of the medium, or because if we just wanted to tell stories, there's more efficient ways of doing it. It could try and write a book or something. It's like a more straightforward way of telling a story than trying to create a whole video game. But there's magic in the unique properties of games and just trying to like tap into that in unique ways. But yeah, I think the team focus is the main. Oh, the last thing I should add about that, with regard to focusing on the team itself, we build games around our strengths as individuals. Those are the constraints. We don't come up with game ideas that we don't think we can execute. And that may seem really creatively constraining or stifling. It's like, oh, you're really limiting yourselves if it sounds like the definition of thinking inside the box of like, rather than outside of like, what can we make? But that's what we've done all along. It's like, what abilities do we have that we can build a game around? Like the quote unquote classic example of that for us is something like the voiceover in Bastion, which came from the fact that Amir and Darren know Logan Cunningham, who's been our principal voice actor in each of our games. Like if they didn't know Logan personally, I don't know that we would have pursued voiceover in Bastion at all. And yet when people experience Bastion, they assume, I think understandably, that the narration must have been like the central idea of that game of like, oh, it's going to be fully narrated. It's like that idea was not there at the beginning of that project. It was a means to an end of the other thing I was describing. So yeah, playing to our personal strengths, trying to keep improving, supporting each other as a team. That's been the single most important thing for us and our ability to stay together all this time. Yeah, and I think I want to add one last thing. It's like we were talking about success and numbers and stuff before. Again, like it's nice to have these other goals around success, but I think for many game developers, their goal is quite similar. Their basic goal is like the one that we've had all along, which is like to live to fight another day. Like your game has to do well enough to where you can afford to make another one after that. If this is what you love, then that is a really important goal for the game to sell well enough. But ideally, you can accomplish that in a way that is consistent with your artistic and personal goals, and you're not just hell bent on making the numbers happen. And I feel like your odds of achieving any numbers goal are going to be higher if you like are honest with yourself about your creative goals as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to come back to that too, because it's, and again, with a lot of the things you shared today, a lot of this stuff, like you said, it sounds pretty obvious, but it really comes to, well, these things are obvious. Clearly, there's a much greater understanding that comes with these concepts, and that one in particular. I mean, to me, the way I interpreted it was simply, yes, these goals are important so you can achieve your dreams, so you can become sustainable. But that doesn't mean sell yourself out either, because then
Right.
you're going to fail at those things that you want to do. Basically stay true to yourself, and keep on keeping on. But don't sell yourself out, because it won't get you there, even though it may feel like that could be the case.
Yeah. Or even if it does get you there, even if somehow it does, you're gonna have to live with it. And if you got into it because you love games and you just want to make games, like you don't want to have to compromise that deeply.
Right.
And we told ourselves this when we were working on Bastion. It's like I remember, and I continue to feel this is true. It's like I would rather, if we were very, like, each game we've worked on, at least for the first couple, it's like this may be, I personally approach each game as though it may very well be the last game I ever work on, for one reason or another, just circumstantially, because you never know. And so just it's really, with Bastion, we didn't know that we would be able to go on. So, but it made it very liberating to work on in some way, because it meant that we could just do our best with that game, be able to look back on we prioritized, like, being able to look back on our development experience fondly, being able to say, we made this game, true to our values, true to ourselves. This is the type of game that we could not have made, could not have even pitched, had we stayed, like, at our like AAA jobs. And so whatever happens, like, we're comfortable with that. We're fine with that, and we weren't that fearful of the outcome as a result, knowing that our odds of success were inherently slim. And then it went on to be successful and position us to make another game, and that was great. That ended up being kind of the icing on the cake, I guess. Like, I think even if Bastion failed, but was, like, still the same game, I'm sure I would be like, have some coulda, woulda, shoulda type of thoughts of, like, oh man, what if only, it had done better, my life might have been different or something like that. But I remember feeling good about that game before it came out. And that was really important to me. Like, I would rather work on, that's, to me, it's the most, it's very, very important. Back to the thing I was saying, because it's just gonna stick with me either way. And I would rather making games is so difficult and so time consuming that it's just important to enjoy the process of it as much as possible, and not just be focused on the outcome. So finding some healthy balance between those things, I guess, which is always tough.
Yeah. Well said. I don't have anything else to comment to that. That was just perfect.
Thanks.
Of course. Well, I think that pretty much covers it then. But before, Mustafa, did you have anything else you want to share, though, before? Because, again, I can't say anything to that.
Yeah, so I know we're running a little long, but this is something that I think it was very important for me to at least mention. One of the reasons why, speaking for myself, it was so important, Greg, to have you on the show and to talk about kind of how, we define success, how to maintain that consistency, and especially, within the context of something like Hades, is because last year you guys were very vocal about your process as far as kind of that balance piece, that work-life balance, that maintaining a healthy culture within your team. And especially during a time where we were seeing a lot of that kind of negative discourse around the AAA space, around development practices for some incredibly like heavy hitter, super popular games, to see you guys kind of stand with them, when it came time for the nominations and the accolades and everything for last year, I think really told a very important story about how we can kind of, I guess for lack of better phrasing, stay the good guys in these stories and still, achieve these levels of success on that numbers side while creating things that are creative and meaningful and important to people, and maintaining, that healthy livelihood as much as is humanly possible, and keeping that balance and still, kind of maintaining the human facet of it. So that's a very multi-dimensional approach to making something so, incredible in execution. And I just wanted to express my appreciation for that and really highlight that, on our show as well.
Well, thank you. I mean, I think, as you know, from at least from stories I've worked on, I find that the idea of good guys versus bad guys, it's often more complicated than that. The interview, like the source of the information about our studio culture is a 2019 interview that Amir and I gave to Kotaku at PAX that year, and that started making the rounds this fall, where we talked about our studio culture and some of what we've learned and the policies that we've instated. For what it's worth, one of the points I make there that I actually felt bad got lost in the shuffle is like, I personally don't think that a lot of what we do, and I said this earlier on the show, I don't think a lot of what we do would scale it works because our team size is small. We can be a bit idiosyncratic in our approach and like cater our studio, like cater our policies to the specific individuals that we have, because we're 20 people. We can do that. Like not everybody works the same way, and we don't have to be like we don't have to like require a super regimented way of working when it's 20 different people who have different preferences. But when you have like 500 or 1,000 people, you can't, like, it's a lot harder to cater to 500 or 1,000 people personally in that way. So I love AAA games as well as independent games. I think it's a minor miracle that any game ships, much less high quality ones. So I have a great deal of empathy, if nothing else. I have like admiration and empathy for so many game developers out there. I still play games regularly that astonish me, that whatever experience I have as a game developer, I still have no idea how they did what they did. I'm blown away by the work that they do. And I know that there's no shortcut to hard work in game development. Like hard work, there's just ultimately, like, to put in the fun, cool, interesting details into a game, it just requires doing more stuff than is strictly necessary, and you have to like create a development process and an environment in which that work can occur. And I appreciate that we're like, I think we're still figuring out still figuring out the best way to do things ourselves. I guess I get a bit uncomfortable of us being sort of put on this pedestal of like, all game companies should be this way. I actually don't think that, because if all game companies were like us, then you would just have a bunch of games exactly like Hades, and maybe that's fine, but I don't want to see AAA games go away or something like that, if that makes sense. I hope that other developers continue to learn and improve in their own development practices so they can find more sustainable ways of making